Thanks, Leon. It's good to see everybody here in this graveyard session. As you might be aware, it's also Friday the 13th, and this presentation is around 1300 hour. So I thought, if the slides come up, that I might do the same as some of the other presenters and just put in a little disclaimer there, just in case something goes wrong. Yep, that should have happened after the disclaimer. Anyhow, so there's the disclaimer. Now that is a good example of a data lake of letters and words that probably don't have too much meaningful information for you. So I thought I'll apply a little bit of intelligence to it, though not artificial, and summarize it for you. So when we talk about digital transformation, it invokes quite a few interesting emotions in people, and I'll just call them digital emotions for today. First one is a little bit of fear. It's amazing how much of our human behavior is driven by fear, even though we don't like it and try to avoid it. But just a mere word of digital disruption. The hurricane in the Bahamas last week was disruptive. We as humans don't like disruption normally. The fear of losing jobs as digital era enters the world, digital transformation. The fear that the CEO is not going to be impressed with the amount of digital work that I've done in my company. But it can also invoke some confusion. What is digital transformation? What is digitization? What is digitalization? What is digital disruption? What is the digital world? Who is this digital that we are talking about? Well, I hope to have the chance to introduce him a little bit more today, and hopefully you'll become better friends afterwards. And maybe we can reduce those first two emotions and become a little bit happier on our Friday afternoon. There's so much exciting stuff happening in the world of digital technology. It's amazing opportunities that's available. So hopefully we get to that point. So since this is a technical seminar, I realized that I better label my figures, so just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Now the digital revolution is part of the fourth industrial revolution. And it's always useful to look back and see where we came from. It helps to know where we are heading into the future. So the first industrial revolution was around 1765, and it was mainly driven by the steam engine. The steam engine had much more power than people and horses. In mining, it enabled us to go deeper, mine more. It was mainly coal mines, since that's what fueled the first industrial revolution. And then about 100 years down the line, the second revolution started, mainly driven by electricity. I don't know about you, but it's hard to imagine a world without electricity. If mine goes down for 1 hour, I'm sort of lost. I have a couple of spare candles in the cupboard, but that's about it. Everything in mining uses electricity. Everything we do these days uses electricity. Then about a century from that time, the third industrial revolution started, which was mainly sparked by the fact that we could digitize data by the computer, by computing power, and we will look in a bit more detail at that era. Basically, that's where digital was born. And now we've entered recently into the fourth industrial revolution. It's a whole vague concept, a lot of buzzwords floating around. Most people don't really know how to define it. We're really in that process of figuring out ourselves what on earth is it about. So another way to look at this is on that slide, where it also labels the third industrial revolution as the first information revolution. With the age of the computer, the internet, information became readily available. data science started growing. And with the data, there's two aspects of intelligence and information that we can add to that, and some other technologies like blockchain, etc. So it's sort of a combination of technologies that brings us to this fourth industrial revolution of applying these new technologies to the data that we have. So it's really just a growth and a second information revolution. It's still digital that enabled all of that for us. And let's look at our friend digital a little bit. So just that we're on the same page in terms of terminology. So what is digital? Digital is discrete, discontinuous representation of information. So if I have a wave, for instance, it might be a sound wave, it might be a light wave, it might be process, whatever, I can digitize it, and it forms a signal that's discrete both in time and in magnitude, in both axes. And then I turn it into a whole lot of 0 and 1s. The other terminology around digital is probably a little bit more confusing. Digitization is really just the process of turning analog data in the world around us into digital data, into 0 and 1s, and store it on computers for processing and transmission. But then if we add another 2 letters, we get to digitalization, which is probably one of the most confusing terms, and industry don't really have an agreed definition for it, but basically it boils down to improving business processes by leveraging digital data and technologies. Then we get to digital transformation, and that's more on a global, not a global scale, but on a company, enterprise-wide scale, reaching across silos. It's sort of putting a lot of digitalization processes all together and using that to modify the existing business processes, culture, and customer experience. So at this point, business culture and those sort of things also starts coming into play. And then we have cyberspace, which is really a virtual world of computers that are connected to each other mainly via the internet. It's an imaginary, intangible, virtual realm made up by bits. It's an amazing world that we as human beings created and doing things in. So let me tell you a little bit about the story of digital. He's a very interesting fellow, consisting of bits. So, and the bits can only take one of 2 states, namely 0 or 1. So the 0 and 1 idea came back from 1669 when Gottfried Leibniz published a paper on the explanation of the binary arithmetic system. So up till then, it was all 10-based number systems. So that was a long time before we actually started using any of that, probably about 2 centuries. After that, a guy by the name of George Boole discovered that he can use 0 and 1s in logic that he called Boolean algebra, or well, what we know as Boolean algebra, called after him. And he defined some simple operators like and, or, and not. It was only in the last century, 1937, that Claude Shannon wrote his thesis at MIT, where he applied this Boolean technology to electronic or electric circuits. And he noticed that we can represent those 0 and 1s by electric components, which opens up a whole new world. He later became the sort of the father of data sciences and things. He was a very clever guy. But it was around 1959 when the MOSFET transistor was invented that it was really enabling this logic of 0 and 1s to be put into use. It was invented at Bell Labs. It wasn't the first transistor, but the first MOSFET transistor was invented there. And it has become the most wildly manufactured device in history. Yeah, that's 16 sextillion. I don't know who of you know how many that is, but that's basically adding 21 zeros to that number. So we have quite a few in this world. Now, in order to just grasp this whole concept of digitization and what it meant for us, I thought the music industry is probably a good one to, sorry, yep, that's right. Sorry, I wasn't there yet. In 1949, a news article in the British newspaper, The Star, was published that said the brain, that is the computer, may one day come down to our level, the common people, and help with our income tax and bookkeeping calculations. But this is speculation, and there is no sign of it so far. Now, that was only 70 years ago. That's about less than a lifetime of our average people in this country. Since that time, the red line shows how computers in this industry grew. The colored lines show the smartphones coming into the market. That only goes up to 2015, so I thought I'll show another trend, just smartphone growth over the last few years. And it's exponential, and we have it everywhere now. It's amazing how fast that grew. So, as I said, in order to demonstrate all of this, I thought I'll use the music industry as an example. Who has seen one of those? Yeah, a few. My grandparents had one. Grandmum nearly got a heart attack when I started playing with it as a little boy. A magnificent mechanical device, the gramophone, to play music, all analog. Then came the record players around using electricity. It was all automated. You switched the button and it started playing the music. After that, we started digitizing music, taking it from analog form into digital form. And we had the cassette players. After that, we discovered that cassette tapes are not really the best form to store things in, especially if you forget it on a hot day in your car. And the CD came about. But it was only in recent years that music became readily available through the internet everywhere, anywhere. We can play it on any device, in our car, wherever we go. And on top of that, artificial intelligence was added to it. An app like Spotify now profiles your music taste and it recommends what music you probably would like to listen to. So that's a true example of digital transformation after the initial step of just digitization of the music. That is how the different technologies peaked and declined over years, and today 80% of the American music revenue is generated by streaming. So, in the mining industry, I'm sure some of you have seen those. Not very digital yet. On the plants, we have inputs on that's coming through 4 to 20 milliamp signals. They are analog signals. At least they get converted at the PLC into digital signals that we can use from there onwards. But there's still quite a bit that we can do in the mining industry to just digitize and get all the data in a format that we can actually use it. Those log sheets contain a lot of useful information, but at the moment they are fairly useless in terms of digital processing. So let's look at the physical versus the virtual world. The physical world consists of atoms. It's an economy of scarcity. In the digital world, it's all about bits, 0 and 1s. In the physical world, it's atoms. So in the digital world, it's 0 and 1, so it probably can't be too difficult. But in the atom world, the physical world, our whole industry is about finding gold atoms and separating them from other atoms. So in the end, it's not that big a deal either. But no, both of them are really complex systems to deal with. So in the digital world, one of the phrases that we hear a lot these days is digital twins. It's really just a model. And we've heard quite a bit about modeling in this conference. It's about observing and be able to understand the data, and from that derive models that we can put to use in a useful way. For that, as you will notice, we need sensors. That's our interaction with the actual world, with the physical world. And we need actuators to interact back with that physical world. So sensors is becoming more and more important. It opens a world of opportunities for us to do things in the digital world. So just this presentation of mine, in the olden days I would have had to make some copies on transparencies, and I would have had one set of hard copies to bring to this conference, maybe two for a backup. But this presentation is already in 4 places. It's in front of me, it's on this computer, it's at home, it's on the cloud, and it was easy to do. It didn't cost a lot. The scarcity factor has diminished dramatically in the digital world, while the physical world is really one of scarcity and limitations. So to that we can add 2 other buzzwords, augmented reality and virtual reality. Virtual reality is really in the virtual world, while augmented reality at least has a connection to the physical world again. And the one missing aspect in that picture is, of course, the humans. Humans are more than just atoms. It's we, as people, that designed these systems. It's us living in this world. It's us making sense of this world, modeling it. It's us defining how we are going to use this digital world and how we're going to apply it to the problems. It's really all about humans and, in the end, making the world a better place for everybody that lives here. So, since people are important and this industry is complex and the challenges are complex, we really believe in collaboration. So one of the things that we as Process IQ have done is that we formed a joint venture partnership with AusIMM Minerals Consulting, and we see that as a really good way of bringing the technology from the one hand and the real expertise in the mining industry together in one place so that we can advance the technology. We also have a consortium that we formed as part of a Mets Ignited project. The Jameson Group specializes in change management processes. Mets Ignited, as you probably heard this morning as well, is an industry-led, government-funded growth center for the mining equipment, technology and services sector. And we are one of 7 Mets companies that successfully applied for the collaborative project funds that they made available for projects like these this year. So we're very excited about it, working with Adelaide and Curtin universities on that as well. So we are always open to working with people in this industry in order to put the efforts together and come up with better solutions and at a better place. Now, I thought I'll put all of this in an example of what we've done recently in the mining industry, just to make it practical. And I think it's quite a good example of how we apply digital technology to get better results. And I think in this industry, with digital transformation, what we really want to have in the end is silos that's broken down, integration along the whole value chain. We want artificial intelligence that analyzes things for us to an nth degree. But in the end, we are going to have to take steps, little steps, one at a time, in order to get there. So when you've got a milling circuit, on the milling circuit, we firstly applied sensor technology so we can get information from that real-world equipment. Then we also put in some advanced control, and we tied that into a remote optimization consulting service, which I will explain to you a little bit later. So I'll take them one by one. First one is the sensor technology. This is the mill slicer signal. It's a pretty cool technology. It's sitting on the mill shell. It's rotating with the mill, and right there, while it's rotating at 10 RPM, it's digitizing the energy information in the real world, processing it, and transmitting it through a digital signal wirelessly back to the base station. And from that, we can see what's going on inside the mill. That's an example of, on the left-hand side, when the mill was still empty. You can see those spikes. If you go count them, they're exactly the same numbers of spikes as there are lifters in the mill. So they are smashing the liners in that mill in that case. Then at a later stage, when the mill was filled up a bit more, maybe even a little bit too much in the second case, you can see that dramatically went down we're actually now smashing rocks and not liners. So that opened, just visually looking at it and making that available to human beings to interpret, made it easier for people to know what's going on and what to do with their mill. So the next step from there was to use that in a control strategy. Now, I'm not going to explain the control strategy to you, but on this slide, what's important to note is that everything to the left of the red line is past. Everything to the right of the red line is future. There's an hour before and an hour after. The lighter blue line on the left-hand side is the model running in parallel with the plant and being updated all the time. So it's a real-time interaction of the digital world with the physical world using a digital twin. This controller is called a robust non-linear model predictive controller. At every second, it updates the predictions for the next hour into the future, which are the lines to the right. And from that, it can calculate what to do and send that back to the sensors, which are mainly the feeders for the milling circuit, in order to control the mill in the most optimal way. So that's an example of a dynamic digital twin. With digital twins, it's not a one-size-fits-all case. You need digital twins for different digital twins for different purposes, different models for different purposes. When you design a plant, you're certainly not going to use this 1 hour prediction of dynamic data. So the third step after these two was to get all the information from the plant into one central cloud-based platform. Now, very proud about the platform that we developed at Process IQ, and we dubbed it the value invention platform, since we believe that there's so much opportunity to invent value, to add value to processes once we've got all that data in one place and start collaborating with people that are real experts in the field. So the basic structure is that we can get data from different sources on the plant, be it from the instruments themselves, be it from the PLCs, be it from databases, be it from Excel spreadsheets that people fill in. And that goes to a cloud-based platform that's accessible anywhere in the world. So your experts sitting in Perth or wherever can see the same data at the same time that your people on the plant can see. Now that opens doors for real amazing consulting and optimization services. So as you jump on a plane, go to a different continent, get to the plant, do a survey, get the results back 2 weeks later, then do the analysis and send it back to the plant in an email, is just not very efficient and a very good turnaround time. Now we can have weekly meetings with instant feedback of what's going on in the plant, which is catching events and optimizing the plant before it's too late. So that's an example of that. In the platform, all the data comes together in one place. So the first one I've shown there, once again, is the sensor. Mill slicer sensor, we can show it in different ways. To humans, that's very useful to be able to see data in different formats. You can see it in a 3D plot, and clearly there was an event with a peak that happened there, probably the feed stopped to the mill. We can play it back and for any period see what happened over that time period. We also get feedback from the control system. It says there that it's heartbroken because it's limited by physical constraints and it can't optimize the plant any further. But we know that the power constraint on the plant has limited the mill for 45%, while the rest of the time it had enough capacity to maintain the mill weight. On top of that, we've got another digital twin, a more static one, a more metallurgical one, for the milling circuit, running in the background, doing a dynamic mass balance, applying some models to the data that's coming in, and that's giving us useful information again to make decisions and estimations. So on those trends, the very top one that you're seeing there, that's an estimate of the mill volume. As anybody in the industry will know, the mill volume is actually what you want to control on, not the mill weight. But all we have in the industry is mill weight. Other problem is that we don't know how many balls are in the mill. The green line there gives an estimate of the ball charge. And it's not as apparent on this trend, but if you look closely, you can see that it went up over time in that time period. That time period is about 6 days. We also have the operating work index, giving us an idea of what's happening with the ore, what kind of ore is coming in, as it changed a lot. And again, on the right-hand side, we've got a different way of visualizing the data during that period. It's a plot of the power against the weight, with the lighter dots, more recent time points. So you can see as the ball charge increased, the power in the mill increased as well, and those dots moved a little bit over to the right-hand side. Now the system at this mine, and unfortunately I can't mention the mine yet, but we are working on a paper for the mill ops, so hopefully we can tell you a lot more information at that conference next year. But they've seen a dramatic improvement in the throughput. We evaluated a period of 64 days before and 64 days after the implementation for periods where we had similar ore feed to the plant. And this was the result. You can clearly see how the blue dots before moved over to the right-hand top, increasing the throughput rate, which is on the y-axis, utilizing more of the available sag power on the x-axis, and much more consistent. So the benefits that we got from that was a combination of consistency, of stability, and of optimization. The results were an increase in fresh feed by 8.5%. The power was on average up by 7%, and all of that was at a slightly finer grind size. Now that's exciting stuff, and when we can do those sort of things, applying digital technology and digital transformation with utilizing our experts in the best possible way, it's becoming really exciting things to do. So I'll leave you with this last comment. The future is uncharted. We can't map it till we get there, but that's okay, because we have so much imagination. If we use it, we have deep talents and inventiveness and exploration. If we apply them, we are brave enough to invent things we've not seen before. Thank you.